some values. And I think it's not just academic values, but even broadening it beyond that. Krista?
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, as you know, there's a huge emphasis on all sorts of cognitive goals, of skills and knowledge that we want students to have in our classes. And sometimes that completely takes over and forget that there are certain types of values that we want them to have, or certain tolerances we want students to develop, or even certain value systems that we want them to acquire and be able to organize and prioritize their values so that the ones that they're learning in class, the academic values, such as like academic honesty, are able to emerge even when there are competing sorts of issues. So using the affective domain is, and specifically there's a source that was co-authored by Benjamin Bloom, as well as David Krathwohl and Bertram Meja. And so this is the Benjamin Bloom, the person who originally came up with Bloom's taxonomy for the cognitive domain, also worked on this particular, and Krathwohl also worked on Bloom's taxonomy. They created book 2 in order to cover the things that weren't covered in book 1. They actually also went on to talk about the psychomotor domain, but that's a completely different topic than today. And so already back in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, there was already a recognition that there needs to be something to complement all of the cognitive skills that we want students to have. We want to also somehow have them value some of the skills that they're learning and value some of the content matter in their classes. And so they came up with this, hierarchy, and that's on your first handout that's stapled packet. And it covers a range of things, from simply being aware of something to being willing to tolerate something, to attitudes and values that are developed, to an entire value system. And so we have a total of 5 categories. They have very specific names, and there are even subcategories. And the entire book, which is, well, it's a pretty thin book, actually goes into great detail on what each of these categories are. But I couldn't copy the book for you, and but the headings and subheadings are really give you a good idea of what each category is about. And I also created a chart here that you have that is a little bit more user-friendly, and that goes from the very, very simplest of receiving, and basically asks you a question, do you want your students to be aware of something? Do you want your students simply to pay attention? That would be an you would create at this very, very easy level. And then we move down into responding. Do you want your students to actively attend to or be willing to respond to your subject matter or your classroom activities? Do you want them to be glad that they participated in class? That would be at that next level of responding. Then valuing, that would be more than just being glad that they responded in class, but over time. This would be when you take anything that occurs in the responding category and you say, this is something that's actually a durable value for this student, and it's not just in this class at this particular time that they value what they're doing, but also it's something that lasts much longer than that. And then for organization, that's when they really begin to start to think about their values, and they're able to generalize their value to different types of situations, and they're able to actually organize their values so that competing values are manageable. And then the very, very last one is characterization by a value, and that's an example of when somebody over the course of years and years and years, sometimes a lifetime, has taken a value and made it so integral to their sense of identity and to something that they practice every single day that anybody would characterize that person as having that value. So a value that becomes so integral to the person that you can see it in practically everything they do. And so these are usually at a very general level, like academic honesty or that sort of thing. And so, well, for the first few levels, I would say even up through level 3, these are things that we could try to attempt for students to achieve in one semester even. And then when it comes to level 4 organization, that might be over the course of a few semesters at the program level. And characterization by a value, there are certain ones that we might be able to achieve by the time they graduate from community college, or they might be something that we have really paved the way for that they might actually achieve years down the road. So, so there's a huge commitment to this characterization by a value level of response. So that's just to introduce the hierarchy, and then I wanted to give you some examples. And then we're actually going to play a game of bingo, and you're going to actually figure out where a different set of examples that I'm going to just draw out of the bag fit on a bingo card. So, and then if there's time at the end, we will actually play another game of bingo where you'll have teams, and you'll get to start drafting your own objectives. So that's the plan for the rest of the day, but I wanted to just give you some really concrete examples so that this starts to come alive. And so in your packet, start off with the 1.0 receiving level. So an example of this would be at least 90% of students will know the content of the syllabus, specifically all aspects that directly pertain to the grading policy. Okay, so this is at that awareness level. We just want students to be aware of the grading policy in the syllabus. Okay, these are very practical issues. Sometimes we need to actually create an objectives to make sure that we follow through and create some activities and some assessment to see if we're actually making students aware, if they're getting it, if they really do end up knowing what our grading policy is. So to support, and this is something that's really just an art, not a science, especially for goals in the affective domain. To create an activity that will support that goal is really just a matter of critical thinking of what could possibly help. Very last page of this handout, I go into more detail on how you can design activities and policies to really help out, to support your objective, and then also how to go about thinking about assessing whether or not you've met your objective. But I want to just jump back into the examples so that you have an idea of what we're talking about. So to support that, that objective of getting the students to be aware of the grading policy, we would say, okay, maybe the instructor will summarize important points on the grading policy of the syllabus during the first class, and then advise students on that those sections of the syllabus will be included on the first exam. This is not something that I particularly do, but I actually heard an adjunct instructor advise people that that's a good way to get students to actually pay attention to your syllabus, is add a few questions to your exam. And then you can post an announcement on Blackboard to advise students of this requirement. So hopefully, covering all your bases. And then the assessment would be that you actually include a few questions on the grading policy and see how the students do. See if they are actually aware of the grading policy. So this is at a very simple level. Most of our objectives will not be at this level, but this is definitely a level that gets used a whole lot, even just for, preschool teachers. So, early childhood education. This level is particularly important. And then to move on to the responding category. An example objective is from the third week of class onward, at least 95% of students will be willing to listen and consider alternate viewpoints from other students during classroom discussions. So at this 2.0 level, we're talking about being tolerant of something. Not just being aware, but really being willing to be a part of something. And this is an issue just for, that I think we see a lot in our classrooms, of being tolerant of other people's viewpoints and finding good ways to actually participate in class and have an academic discussion. So the instructor will explicitly call for multiple opinions to be expressed during class discussions, and will end each discussion with a summary of how each contribution has enriched the discussion by illuminating a particular facet of that issue. So, so this would be a good way for a professor to reinforce that, that all of the students really are contributing to the class discussion, even though their viewpoints are oftentimes different. And for assessment, that's really easy. You don't have to actually design a test question to assess every single objective you have in the affective domain. So this might just be monitoring students during class. And specifically, the instructor might note if there is an absence of unproductive behavior, such as one student muttering dissent while another student is speaking. So you have to really just kind of tap back into your classroom experience and say, okay, what does it look like when students are not being tolerant of each other's views? And so what things am I going to look at to see if I'm not actually meeting this objective? And if I'm not meeting the objective, then maybe some direct instruction and talking to the students to make that value clear and to show benefits of having that value might be in order. Are there any questions so far?
Just in terms of the percentages, those are, how does one, I mean, how useful are percentages?
Well, I'm thinking that the reason why I create percentages is I had to do that to maintain a grant, actually. I had to have a very specific benchmark. And then I realized that, you know what, you're not entirely sure. You haven't set a very definite objective unless you have some idea of either how many students are going to meet that objective or whether all students are going to meet that objective at a certain level. So I tend to put in these percentages just to recognize that, okay, some students are not going to be tolerant from the very first day of class, and they're the ones that are going to need to learn that. And so I try to set something that's kind of realistic, but still something to strive for. So generally speaking, in my classes, you know, there are always just a few students who are kind of muttering under their breath. And what I would like is for it to go down to just one student per class, maybe. You know, so it's really it's really just kind of finessing to what's your experience in general, trying to quantify it so that then you can try to actually raise the bar just a little bit with your objectives. So yeah, that's the purpose that I include percentages of students. Okay, and then for valuing, an example of that would be at least 60% of students will show the initiative to seek 2 or more perspectives to include in written assignments. Okay, so if you want to have students value multiple perspectives in your classroom, then this might be a sort of an objective that might be interesting to you. And if that's really important to you, then maybe your number is going to be way higher than at least 60% of students. It depends on how much you're willing to devote in your classroom during the semester to supporting this particular objective.
Would it also depend on the assignment, too? Because if the assignment asks them to include one or more perspectives, then you would want 100%.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, and if you are directly instructing them, you know, over the course of several, you know, classes or something, then yeah, then you should set the bar really high for yourself, and maybe it should be 3 or more, perspectives that you're expecting them to include. Yeah. So an activity that would support this would be if the instructor would explicitly model good critical thinking skills for the class, and including included within those critical thinking skills would be the practice of considering different people's perspectives or your own perspective over different times during your life, or whatever is appropriate for the particular assignment. And then you could actually provide written feedback to students, praising them for the inclusion of multiple viewpoints, noting the lack thereof, and then keep a tally of the number of students who actually did provide multiple viewpoints. So that's the sort of thing where you just have like a little piece of paper beside you, just, you know, a tick mark in each column, and that would be a really quick way of just seeing how many students really are meeting this objective. Usually these assessments don't have to be very rigorous because it's not anything that somebody else is going to monitor. Usually it's just for your own, you know, for your own sense of what's happening in your class and what you personally want your students to gain as values. And then for organization, an example objective would be, after the first test has been given, fewer than 10% of the students will have unexcused absences from tests or hand-in work late without an acceptable excuse. So it's not absolutely explicit in this objective, but we're starting to recognize here that some of the reasons why students don't come to their tests and don't hand in their work on time is because they have competing commitments. And so, yeah, it's not just that they want to slack off in your class. It's that they have other, family responsibilities, and they haven't yet figured out how to prioritize and how to make sure that they're still keeping up with their values to do well in school. So, so the activities and policies could be that, okay, the instructor will ask students to reflect on the importance of higher education in their lives, to remember that this is a priority, and actually give practical ways in which they can prioritize their classes and proactively plan their schedules so that competing commitments will rarely interfere with academic responsibilities. Okay, so this would actually involve some class time talking about what students' other commitments are and how they get in the way, and brainstorming some ideas for what they could do to proactively anticipate some of these things that might come up. And so the instructor would keep track of unexcused absences from tests and occurrences where assignments are late without an unacceptable excuse, and revisit that discussion with students if you're not meeting their goal of fewer than 10% not having excused absences. And then at the very end of that, the instructor may require that requests to make up exams due to unexcused absences and late assignment submissions are accompanied by a written explanation of what events interfered with the academic obligations and a specific plan of behaviors designed to anticipate and avoid such problems in the future. So that's something that the instructor might not have thought to develop, that particular mechanism, if it hadn't been, forefront in their mind that they wanted students to actually meet this objective. And so requiring students to explain what happened and how there might be a way to avoid that in the future would be one way of using the assessment to then go back and create a supportive activity so that students will actually hopefully meet that goal, at least at the end of the semester. And then at the very highest level is characterization. This is something that you would need at least to be an adult to be able to achieve any affective goals at this level. And it's something that requires years of maintaining a values system and figuring out how to prioritize values so that you would actually exhibit the given value often enough that somebody would characterize you as having that value. So An objective might be at least 99% of graduating students who pursue a 4-year degree will be characterized by the faculty of their transfer institutions as students who display very high standards of academic honesty, such as no history of plagiarism or cheating on tests. And the faculty in several of each graduating student's courses will explicate the necessity for academic honesty, give students detailed information to define plagiarism, and enact strategies to avoid engaging in plagiarism, as well as maintain policies that uphold a high standard for academic honesty. And so the key phrase there is over several courses. So this is not something that's going to happen just after taking one professor's course, that one professor who was really good at teaching about, plagiarism. This is something that needs to be reinforced time and time and time again for that to become a value that the student would be characterized by. And so an example of assessment for that would be if degree programs at Capital maintain contact with graduates for at least 2 years and obtain written permission to obtain information about the student's academic progress from faculty at the transfer institution. And then in the spring semester of the second year after graduation, degree programs would send surveys to the current professors and asking them to disclose any instances or concerns about academic honesty. Yes.
Have you tried that?
No, this is in theory. I haven't actually done this, but I know that there's at least one degree program here who maintains contact with students, and this would be a great thing. I mean, a great check to see how our students are doing after they go to transfer institutions, because I know our policy is not nearly as stringent as four-year institutions' policies, and so it would be interesting to see if our students actually did uphold that. So this is in theory, and this is just to show you that this is not something that at the characterization level, it's not something that you could just ask the students in your class. Mm-hmm. It's the sort of thing that after years and years and years, maybe you'll start to detect it in somebody. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of practice before we start playing bingo. I have an example set of objective activity and assessment that all align within the same exact level. And so I was thinking if you could just take a few minutes to read through and compare the topic headings, the outline headings, as well as the chart, and see if you can try placing that and see what level it is. Yes?
I'm struggling because I think our values should be much more than that. If our highest value is they're not cheating on exams,
right.
How about our highest value be they make a contribution to this world which has credibility and authenticity and integrity to it?
That would be great. You can create as many objectives as you want. And this is just a very, very specific one and probably easy to assess. I wanted to make sure that I could design a viable assessment for each example that I provided here. But absolutely, that should be an objective.
Sometimes we lower our standards too
Right.
much. And that actually, if a college degree means that they can make a contribution to the world, there are a lot of very high-level values that a college graduate must have to be able to make that contribution. And I think we should expect that of them. I think we should, and not assume it takes a lifetime to develop academic honesty. They should come in with academic honesty. Absolutely.
Hopefully.
And in nursing, we're really tough about it. I mean, because we're taking them into medication rooms where they are giving heavy-duty medications to vulnerable populations, and we can't have them cheating on the amount of morphine they draw up. So, I just would say to us as a college, we really need to be very clear about integrity and throughout all our courses, so that we set them up to be successful adult professionals in this world, if indeed we're going to call them college graduates. Don't you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I have absolutely no problem with making, you know, all sorts of really advanced objectives and making something to strive for. And the examples that I gave, I wanted to give an example of, you know, something that is really reasonable to expect a student to achieve just in the 2 years that they're here. Because we should also take into account that we don't know what students are like before they come. So I don't know that we can expect that students would actually have a high level of academic honesty before they arrive. Partly because some of our students are 18 when they come in as students, and in this particular book, the authors say, well, this is something that you really can't expect from anybody who's younger than an adult. And so they're still kind of forming their value systems and their ideas of what ethics are at that age in adolescence, really, as teenagers. And then you don't know exactly how long some of these sorts of things will take, and so absolutely it would be great to say our goal is to have students be characterized by contributions they make to their societies, and, you know, the volunteer work that they do, you know, the social activism, whatever sorts of ways that we want them to be good citizens and that we're supporting them for. But I also want to realize that it takes many years to be able to get to that level. And so some people want to, you know, reserve this type of characterization thing for, you know, just 1 or 2 qualities that a person will exhibit the most. So I guess there's a little bit of a disagreement within the field of exactly what characterization means, exactly what level is it. Is it, you know, the absolute highest level that I can achieve in the 2 things that I'm best at, or is it anything that I would be at a professional level for? So I think that, yeah, we should have these high goals and expectations, and we should also try to support them, but we might not necessarily see them at the end of the 2 years that they're here.
But I think this is a good starting off point.
It's,
For all the courses to work on.
yeah, to actually to articulate something and say, yeah, this is an objective, and I'm committed to supporting it with activities in my classroom, with policies in my syllabus, and also with assessing to see whether we're making some sort of progress toward it. Yeah. Did everybody get a chance to look through this example? Mm-hmm. Okay, does anybody want to give an answer?
Level 2, responding?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And what made you think level 2?
Because it's the objective stressed the willingness to attempt.
Yeah.
And there was something else in the activity, which now I just lost it with my eyes, but essentially the willingness to attempt.
Okay. Yep. And active participation in the activity. They're trying to get some active participation, not just sitting there and being aware of what's going on in class, but also participating in class. And then they're going to monitor levels of student participation. So, okay, hopefully that was pretty straightforward. And so this is actually, I was thinking about Statway last night. I created an extra one just for Statway. Okay, so then we can actually move on to your bingo card. And everybody has a different bingo card. Hopefully, if you don't have a bingo card, come up and get one. And you'll need a pen. Okay. So the way this bingo game is going to work is you're working for prizes here. We have Butterfinger and Baby Ruth candy bars as prizes.
Oh, wow.
And the first few people, do you have all the handouts too? So the first few people who get all in one line, you can't really do diagonal on this one because it's not a square, but either a horizontal or a vertical line, just yell bingo and then and let me know. And then eventually we'll be going to black out the card. Hopefully we'll have enough time for that. Actually, after we have a few winners, then we'll just take a poll and see if you want to actually take a hand at creating your own at that point, or whether you want to continue placing the ones that are pre-made, which is a little bit easier. Okay. So I'm going to read off an activity and an assessment in this particular case. And you're going to actually figure out where they fit, at what level, and then just put a few key words to describe them in your on your bingo card. And then when you actually get bingo, you're going to read off those key words so that we can match up and see if you ended up putting them in the right place.
So did you say you're giving an activity and an assessment? So
Yes.
two different slots?
You're going to actually use 2 squares for this, and the reason for that, and they're going to be at the same level. The reason for that is I made all of these things, and I was planning on choosing an objective, an activity, and assessment each separately. But then I realized some of these activities didn't quite stand on their own; that you couldn't tell exactly what level they were supporting. So, but it's much clearer in the objective and the assessment what level the actual objective is at. Okay, so I'm going to read the assessment first, because it's a little bit clearer, and then you can basically kind of confirm with yourself when I read the activity. So the assessment is, in clinical trials where students engage in nursing duties in a real hospital setting, the supervising hospital staff members will observe and note any failures to comply with a standard professional level of sanitation procedures during the course of the semester. Okay? The activity that supports that is the instructor will moderate class discussions that center on juggling multiple responsibilities and elicit from students pragmatic solutions to situations where different values and work ethics must be prioritized or new procedures would need to be invented in order to adequately address the situation at hand. Okay? Is that way too hard? Or do you have some sense of where that might fit?
Can you read the activity again?
Sure, okay? And I will actually stress some important phrases.
Okay, that would be good.
because I realize this is kind of hard, just jumping in and trying to use this taxonomy. Okay. So the instructor will moderate class discussions that center on juggling multiple responsibilities and elicit from students pragmatic solutions to situations where different values and work ethics must be prioritized, or new procedures would need to be invented in order to adequately address the situation at hand. Okay? And so in the assessment, they're looking for a professional level of sanitation procedures during the course of the semester in the clinical trials. Okay, so you could even just use sanitation or something like that, nursing example or something as your key words. Okay, so you just come in, you want to grab some handouts?
Cheating, no cheating.
Well,
They're watching you.
incidentally, we all have different ones.
I
Yes,
told Becky to make sure that she did that with you, Stephen.
That way
I
you
told her
can't
that.
cheat.
I told her.
No, you can't, you can cheat, but, by looking at your neighbor's answer. But, yeah, every bingo card, well, I have like 12 different versions of the bingo card. So
Oh,
actually,
okay.
we might have 2 people have bingo at the same time. But I wanted to make sure the free spaces were in different spaces so that we don't.
You're never going to come back to a Center for Teaching workshop. This is Stephen's first Center for Teaching workshop. We're just trying to make him feel welcome.
Becky, did you say we just entered into 2 different spaces?
Yeah, for that one, I gave both.
Activity and one under assessment?
One under activity, one under assessment at the same exact horizontal level on your bingo cards. Yeah. Okay, so here's a new one. Might be a different topic, and actually there are a couple of different examples for some of these different levels. So just to advise you, you're not necessarily looking, so for example, this nursing one could have a completely other example as well. So don't just look for a nursing example to be the objective that goes with that. There are multiple examples for some of these categories, just to make it more difficult. Okay, so here's a new objective. At least 70% of students in an upper level course will express a desire to apply what they are learning in class to situations that arise outside of the context of the course, such as by using course concepts in situations that will not directly affect the student's grade.
What's the key word?
So apply what they're learning in class in situations that arise outside the context of the course. So that might be, you might have to just eliminate a few categories for that. Oh, and actually desire. We'll express a desire to apply what they are learning in class to situations outside of class.
And we're looking for the objective here?
Yes, this is an objective.
This is an objective. Okay.
You'll put it in your objective column and
Right.
just try to figure out exactly where it fits on the hierarchy. So students will express a desire to apply what they're learning in class to other situations. You could even call that, applying in real world or something, applying lessons in real world. Okay, ready for the next one? Okay. This is a combination of activity and assessment. So the assessment part is, after handing back students' final reports, the instructor will ask the class for a show of hands to indicate whether students were happy with the quality of the final paper they produced. That's the stress part, happy with the quality of the final paper they produced. The instructor will follow up with a question to ask how many students were unhappy with the quality of their final reports in order to distinguish the percentage of non-responders from those who are unsatisfied with their work. Okay, and then the activity that supports that will hopefully lead to that assessment is the instructor will initiate a series of assignments to scaffold students in their attempt to write their first college level research report. So this needs to be a series of assignments. That's the important part. Can't just be done in one class. A series of assignments to help students in their attempts to write their first college level research report. A series of written homework assignments will begin with an assignment to identify a promising topic of study, followed by a plan for finding appropriate resources, an outline for major components of the research report, and a first and subsequent draft of the final report. After each individual assignment, students will receive extensive feedback from the instructor. So hopefully that would be enough of an activity, a lot of support so that students actually would be happy with the quality of their final product when they're done with it. So that's just, emphasize the connection between needing to support these objectives and then hopefully finding that level in the assessment. Okay, does everybody have a guess for that? You might have to narrow down and just guess. There are certain categories that you could at least eliminate. Okay, here's an objective for a new one. At least 75% of students will be willing to attempt, there's the phrase, willing to attempt, assignments that require them to practice skills that are more advanced than they are accustomed to.
What was this, an objective?
This is an objective. Yes. So willing to attempt or practicing advanced skills would be good keywords for that. Okay.
So if we have a line all the way across.
All the way across,
it is
then you have bingo, then yell bingo. Not yet?
I have a line across, but I'm not sure.
You don't want to check it. Okay. Okay, let's take a poll here. How many people think this activity is too hard? 2, 3, 4. How many of you would like to actually just have teams so that you can discuss with each other?
I like to see the words.
You want to see the words? Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think the hard part is when we move on and we've done stuff, I don't know whether what I've done so far is correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's
Right.
how bingo works. But
That's, yeah, there's a certain
and
level
I'm
of
afraid
risk.
later I'm not going to remember.
Right.
I have to go all the way back through them, so I'm not sure that I can learn. That's no idea.
Okay, so a little unsure.
Because I think that's what-
You think you have it? Okay, great. Read them off.
So the 75% will attempt, I put under objective responding.
Attempt assignment.
Yes, so that's 2.0 responding for the objective. Yep.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And under activity,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going responding all the way across. The series of assignments that was scaffolded,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yep.
Yes. And then finally under assessment, I had a free one, but I put in anyways, handed back the assignment, happy with the quality of final report.
Yes. That's exactly it. And so that is, if we look up on the taxonomy, those were like willingness to respond and satisfaction in response specifically. Yeah, so willing to actually attempt assignment problems that are harder than what they're used to is at that 2.2 level. And then even beyond that is being satisfied with how you've participated. And that would be being happy with the report that you handed in. Absolutely. We have our first prize winner. You don't want any?
This one. I would.
Can I leave it back here and you can pass it around the next people that win?
I
Okay.
think John too has a bingo.
Oh, you also have bingo?
I believe John does.
Well, let's check on the sanitation one,
Okay. What level did you put that at?
organization,
Mm-hmm.
and then that was the activity and the assessment, and I had a free objective.
Oh, perfect.
Bingo.
You also have bingo.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good. Do you want to continue playing and see if more people can get bingo? Because seeing more objectives and everything and trying to fit them into the hierarchy, I think, is a good activity for making you feel more comfortable with it. Okay. Here's an objective, just an objective. At least 80% of graduates at Capital Community College will be readily recognized by their work colleagues as lifelong learners. Okay, so readily recognized as lifelong learners. The key phrases there.
Can I give another item, going across? Is that one characterization by a value,
Mm-hmm.
under objective, activity, other one desire to apply outside of class?
That one is actually at an easier level.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So that one will come up again when somebody gets bingo at that level.
What was
Okay.
the second one she said? I'm sorry.
She said desire to learn, apply knowledge outside of class. that was at some level that's easier than characterization, something above that. Okay, so then we have an activity and then also an assessment. So I'll do the assessment first. The instructor will monitor the students throughout each class session to make sure that they are not engaging in behaviors that remove their focus from the lesson. So focus is an important
Is this going back to
keyword.
that same objective you just read? Or this is a
This
new
is a
thing?
new one. This is a completely new one. I drew a new piece of paper.
So you did an objective and now you're doing another assessment?
Now I'm doing an assessment, and then I'm going to follow that with the activity that goes with that
Okay,
assessment.
okay.
Okay?
All right.
So this is a completely new one.
All right.
So the instructor will monitor the students throughout each class session to make sure they are not engaging in behaviors that remove their focus from the lesson, such as texting or engaging in side discussions during class. Okay? And then so the activity and policy that will actually support that are, at the same exact level, are the instructor will include in his or her syllabus a policy on class participation, which provides for a reduction in grade for any student who's reminded in class to stop a side conversation or refrain from texting. So notice that this is not a whole lot of extensive activity here in class to support that particular objective. So that's a clue. Sorry?
Is that receiving of those?
Well, you have to say input, right?
Bingo is that one, it's receiving of bingo. It's not-
Yes, that is the 1.0 receiving category.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's being
Shouldn't she just
aware,
make the
paying
rest
attention.
of the bingo? Otherwise she gets back the candy that she gets.
And I have bingo too.
Yes, oh, we have more bingos, okay, yes.
Chop it down to more than one bingo?
Yes, you can have more than one
Oh,
bingo.
absolutely. Oh, God, no, the pasta.
So anybody who had a free square at the objective of that level, of that 1.0 level, probably has bingo now.
Even is always nasty.
Okay, are you ready to go on to the next one?
Yes.
Okay. This is another set of activity and assessment. I'll do the assessment first. The instructor will conduct an anonymous survey at the end of the semester to poll students on whether they see any opportunities where they will likely use what they have learned in their personal or work lives. And the activity that supports that, you really need to kind of hear both of them together to have an idea here. The instructor will sensitize students to opportunities for applying lessons from class to situations in the real world, and will regularly infuse lessons with detailed examples that illustrate how to apply concepts from class to solve problems in a practical setting, as well as research that shows the benefits for doing so. Okay? Okay, you have another bingo? Okay, which line do you have?
Valuing.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one under objective, I wrote down upper class desire to apply, upperclassmen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's,
And then
And
the
you said
last
valuing,
example that you just gave, I used for both activity and assessment in the valuing line.
yes. And those three actually all go together.
Why are those
That objective actually goes with the activity and assessment, all for that one particular.
Cindy, can I have a bingo?
Yes, you have one too?
No. Now that Cindy explained it, I have bingo too. Can you explain why that's value? Why that?
I don't understand that.
Yeah, I didn't put value.
Why is it more
The
valuable?
first one you read, I think, was the assessment,
Okay.
and I thought value at first, and then I think when you went to the activity, I thought maybe I was wrong and it was organization.
Okay, so for this valuing level, this is what they are written now. And actually, were you confusing it with the responding level or with organization? Like, were you thinking it was maybe a little bit lower,
When you were reading
or?
assessment, I don't remember what it is now, but
Okay.
when you're reading assessment, I thought it was valuing, and then when you read the activity, I thought, oh, no, I'm wrong, it's organization.
Okay,
Can I
okay,
have a
thank you for
minute?
coming.
Yes.
Okay, so the question is, how is it that the assessment seems clear, but the activity, it might not seem like it's value? So that's, yeah, sometimes if you just create an activity to help support your particular objective, and it's not as clear that it's exactly at that particular level. But it should be something that is supportive of the objective. So the objective is you want students to actually even desire to apply what they're learning in class.
So I guess where I'm confused is in that last one under valuing was the show commitment to the value.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that show commitment to a value needs to be demonstrated in some way, which is why I put it there. And then-
Right. That is, this commitment or conviction is actually the highest level of valuing. So valuing also includes accepting a value or showing preference for a value. So I would say that expressing a desire to apply learning from class into the real world, expressing that desire to me would be that middle level of showing a preference for a value. That they're actually choosing that value, they're initiating it. Does that make sense?
That was a tricky one.
Yeah, they are tricky, and so I actually wanted to kind of go through some pre-made ones so that you get an idea of what they could look like in different types of classes and different types of situations and everything. So that hopefully you'll get enough examples so that you will feel comfortable trying to actually try drafting something yourself. Okay, do you want to go through like one more? It's about 2:27 right now. So does anybody want to do one more question, one more level, or do you want to actually have any comments you want to share about the affective domain, about this activity?
I choose the second option.
Okay, great, discussion.
Wrap it up.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions or clarification, or? Yep.
I'd be interested in knowing how you use this in your own course, how you apply these ideas.
So basically I try to think of what do I want students to know at what level, and then remind myself specifically that I need to have some sort of activity to support that. So it's good to know, to be able to think about what level you want somebody to do something. So for example, I had a case of plagiarism just this semester, and the student told me that he really didn't understand the definition of plagiarism, and somebody who's like English as a second language speaker, and so even though he understood specifically that he would need to taking another student's work and putting your name on it is plagiarism, and that's what he thought plagiarism was. And I included a description of what plagiarism is. It wasn't a very long description, but I included a definition of plagiarism in my syllabus. I made sure that I went over the syllabus in class. I have no way of knowing, though, whether or not he was actually present that day. I think that he probably was. But, so I'm not entirely sure that he was aware. So that already I'm thinking, okay, awareness. That's at this very first level of receiving. So I'm thinking, okay, I really want all of my students, I want to make sure that all of my students are aware of what plagiarism is, what the definition is, how people end up getting sucked into, those types of behaviors. And so yeah, he was an English as a second language learner. And so he described the process as he was trying to do some extra work for the course. He ended up using the internet, which wasn't even necessary. He could have just used class notes and my PowerPoint presentations to get the information. But he went and he wanted to do an extra good job on his assignment, and so he went and he found some information on the internet and copied it for his notes, and then realized that this person had put it into words so much better than he could, especially since he understood that his grammar was not all that great. So then he ended up just kind of editing it down at a sentence level and including it. So so actually I made an example for plagiarism for this game. I didn't happen to pick them out of the bag, but this is something that I was thinking, you know what, I want to avoid this type of scenario entirely next semester. So, so I'm going to create an objective at this awareness level, this receiving level, and say all students will be aware of different actions that count as plagiarism, situations where students are often tempted to plagiarize, and students will be aware of the instructor's policies regarding plagiarism. So then I have much more extensive activities to support that than what I did this semester. So then I'm going to include in my syllabus not only a policy on plagiarism, which includes a clear definition and specific consequences for committing plagiarism. Okay, I already have a definition, but I could make it clearer. And I'm also going to spend in class at least 10 minutes describing what counts as plagiarism, situations that make plagiarizing particularly tempting, and I'll have a handout provided to any for students so they'll be able to reference it in the future. It won't just be those ephemeral words that I said and maybe they didn't write down. And then I'm going to explicitly describe the consequences, which I actually did this semester. That wasn't where the problem was. And students who were absent will be given the handout and told that they must take a non-graded 5-minute quiz on plagiarism before they can submit their first written assignment. So I was thinking that's really the only way to catch everybody and make sure that they know what plagiarism is, because so many students miss the first day of class or even the first couple of weeks of class. So here's like a backup plan for every single student that if they weren't in class and taking attendance, and if they weren't in class, then I make sure that they end up doing something written, or it could be something even in my office hours where I know that they know what the definition of plagiarism is. And then so my assessment for that is, during that first class discussion, I could describe a few scenarios and poll students on whether the various examples count as plagiarism and what the consequences would be for the student. And then the students who are absent from class receive the handout and a quiz. Non-graded, it's not like they're going to lose points for it or anything, but it's just a requirement that says you need to do this and show me that you know what plagiarism is before I start accepting assignments, because that was actually on the first written assignment this semester that I received plagiarized work. So this is an example of how having knowledge of this taxonomy can help you to kind of think about some problems that are happening in your classroom, just regular problems that you want to avoid and what level you need to avoid it. So this is at the absolute easiest level. But of course, we also want to encourage our students to gain values for academic honesty beyond that. But I found that in my particular course, my problem was that a student was not aware enough, or was very convincing in explaining that he was not aware of what plagiarism was.
What would you do if a student took the non-graded quiz, still had no recognition of what plagiarism was, but the assignment was due? Do they get extra time?
That would be something to work out. Yeah, somehow those sorts of things always end up occurring, and so then I would say, okay, I'm going to look at this assignment, and if this person had plagiarized, then maybe I would actually give them a chance to redo it, because they obviously didn't understand what plagiarism was by failing this non-graded quiz. So, I mean, luckily plagiarism doesn't happen all that often. But I would definitely make sure that I went over and then in office hours or something and say, okay, you can't submit any more assignments until we get this clear on this. Yeah. So I know that we're out of time, but if any of you have further interest in using the affective domain, or you want to, contact me to see if you're on target or anything, then just let me know. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you say this is Bloom?